All right, guys, welcome to episode 40 of the Choose FI radio podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing the mind-blowing concept of the gap year.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, guys, welcome back. Today, we have a very special episode. We are going to be interviewing Noah and Becky. Noah should be very familiar to our Choose FI community because he's a moderator on our Facebook group. But in addition to that, he's also the brainiac behind moneymetagame.com. And if that weren't enough, he's also our in-house expert for finance-related life hacks. So he's got a lot of content on his own. But on top of all that, his wife, Becky, is really the power force behind this idea of actually doing this gap year. So it felt totally appropriate to do this interview with them as a couple. And we're very excited to get a chance to tackle this amazing concept and idea, which most people in the FI community can replicate. So to help me do this today, I have my co-host, Brad. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Jonathan. Yeah, this should be a fun episode. I had the good fortune of meeting Noah and Becky last year at FinCon, and I actually went out to lunch with them when I didn't really know them at all. And it was a really fun time. And now it's cool that Noah's now one of the moderators of our Facebook group. And yeah, they're here on the podcast. It's fantastic.
So we're excited to do this. Hi, Noah. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. You're really hyping me up there. I hope I can live up to the expectations.
Well, just in case you can't, we decided to go ahead and bring you and Becky on the show today. How you doing, Becky?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Doing absolutely fantastic. I would love to just hop right into our main topic, and we're going to talk about this idea of a gap year, or maybe more specifically, the value of quitting early and quitting often. But before we do that, I thought maybe we could take just a second and talk about your story, the Money Metagame story, and also behind that, just you and Becky as this power couple of FI, what your journey has actually looked like. Can you maybe set the stage for us a little bit? When did you guys get on this path?
Yeah, I can try to set it up. So we'll start with college. So me and Becky met in college and then ended up moving out to Seattle together for a job. College was Purdue. Moved out to Seattle, so all the way across the country away from our family. And then we just did what normal adults do. We got a fancy apartment downtown. We got a dog. And then about a year later, we realized the apartment was pretty expensive. So we got a big house. Because you got to build equity, right? And then not long after we bought the house is when we stumbled upon this whole financial independence, credit card churning, travel hacking, and all that other stuff kind of happened at once. And then we really just had kind of a purpose for our finances. And we really just started dialing it up from there so we could reach a level where we'd feel comfortable walking away from work at an early age.
So I'm curious about that. Tell me, and maybe Becky, you tell me, what was your introduction to FI and what came first? Was it travel rewards or was it this idea of financial independence?
So I think it was kind of the travel hacking that started first. We took a couple trips back home and spent way more money than we wanted to on flights. And we're like, I don't think we can keep this up long term. And Noah kind of stumbled across ways to get cheap flights and ways to get some points that way. But bringing me onto it was definitely difficult. And I was not really on board with it right away just because it seemed so far-fetched and so out there. But I've definitely come to realize the excitement of it and the value that it can bring in our future. And I'm 100% on board now.
Becky, talk us through that conversion, if you will. So if Noah is anything like Jonathan, certainly, and me to a lesser extent, you have these kind of harebrained ideas and you bring them to your spouse. And as Jonathan says, they just kind of give you a pat on the head and say, okay, here's another crazy thing, right? Like, is Noah like that, A? And B, like, how did he talk you through this? Or like, did he introduce you to certain articles that might have changed your mind? Like, talk us through how that worked precisely.
I think it was just kind of how he modeled it. He brought on the idea like, hey, I think we can retire really early. And he's always thrown out this number of 40 that we could retire by that age. And that was just completely unreal to me. And being brought up in my family of very conservative people who, work in their job forever. And don't really take a whole lot of vacations. I just didn't think that was the right thing to do. And then he did bring up Pete from Mr. Money Mustache. He kind of showed me his blog, and I was reading a few articles on there. And obviously you guys know Pete. He's a little more on the extreme side of FI. So that really kind of threw me off. I'm like, I don't think I want to do that. That just seems a little too crazy. And then I think we kind of just stopped talking about it, but he doesn't love his job to the point where he wants to do it forever. And for me, I was at the point where I was really enjoying what I did, and I didn't really want to walk away. And I thought that I was abandoning my profession by doing that. And then there came a point where I wasn't loving what I was doing, and it was a lot more stress and a lot more exhaustion in my day-to-day life. And that kind of opened up my eyes to really what he was trying to tell me. And we kind of just went from there.
So Noah, why don't we go back to your perspective? So what was your introduction to the FI community, and what was your thought process in terms of, I need to get my spouse on board with this?
Sure. So I can tell you, the first time I stumbled upon the idea of financial independence was actually on Reddit. I was a pretty heavy Reddit user in college and beyond that once we moved to Seattle. And at some point, they made the personal finance Reddit a default. So it showed up for everybody instead of just being kind of hidden in the corners and someone had to link you to it. So that started showing up. And then I noticed an interesting pattern as I was learning more about personal finance in general, was that whenever people talked about retiring early, people would send them over to the financial independence subreddit. And then whenever people would talk about credit cards, they would end up getting sent over to like the churning travel hacking Reddit. So basically Reddit made personal finance a default. And then that basically showed me about these other two places that I could go on my own. And yeah, just kind of escalated from there.
It seems to me, so your website, moneymetagame.com, it's a blend of financial independence and travel hacking. That's kind of how you've pieced it together. And I find that very interesting because, as you know from our show and what we do, we latched on to travel rewards as a frankly, what we called a pillar of FI. So I think we've very much come to the same place mentally with how we approach this, maybe for very similar reasons, although, how we're framing it may be slightly different. But it is interesting that maybe in traditional personal finance, the credit cards are viewed as the bane of your financial existence. It's all about getting rid of the credit cards. And I think if you're being intellectually honest, you can understand where they're coming from. But at the same time, once you're what we have now started calling being a firewalker, once you're on this path, the merging of those two has synergistic results. And it allows you to have this life of freedom and opportunity, which you just don't hear about outside of our little universe.
And Noah, also give us a background on the name, if you don't mind. I've always been curious.
Yeah, I can do that as well. So, about the time that I discovered both financial independence and travel hacking, I mean, it's these two like crazy ideas that like if you just go up to somebody on the street who's not familiar with and tell them like, oh, I'm going to retire by 40 or, oh, I'm going to open a bunch of credit cards and travel the world for free, they're going to think you're nuts. Normal people don't do that. I'm very skeptical by nature, but on both of these things, like I did my due diligence, I did all the research and everything checked out. And even with the credit cards, like I just started small with a single card, got the rewards, booked a flight, took the flight, came back and like everything worked. And then it's like, wow, you can do this a whole bunch of times.
Nothing had burned down.
Yeah, nothing exploded.
Your marriage was still intact.
Yeah, everything was still good. And then, like I said, if you just tell somebody, they're going to think you're crazy. But I obviously want to kind of spread the word, tell more people about this because they're such powerful ideas. And my theory was I'd create a blog, put a bunch of information on there. And then whenever these sorts of things came up in conversation, instead of having to dive into like several hours of explaining how it works and why we're doing it and everything else, I could just point them to the blog. So it kind of became the point where my goal for it was to be a place that I could point friends and family who had interest in what we were doing or had some curiosity, and they could get all the information they wanted on the blog. And it naturally got some readers from there, and it's kind of grown a little bigger than I initially expected. But I mean, that's definitely a positive thing. And then Brad was curious about the name, and so Money Metagame, which actually, I'm still 50-50 on whether or not that was a good name to choose because a lot of people mess up the spelling of metagame or add spaces because it's not a common word. But the idea of the metagame is something that I picked up from video games, which I was really into in high school and college. Basically, the metagame it goes beyond the regular mechanics of the game and involves the high-level strategy of how people are doing it at a competitive level. So the theory with the name was just kind of to be like, this is finance or credit cards or everything else it's at that next level. It's not your average personal finance blog. It's something that you're not going to read about everywhere else. It's something that will take you outside the norm.
Well, it's been well documented on this show what a fan I am of the gamification of personal finance. So I applaud you for everything about your branding with regards to the metagame. So we do have a lot to cover today, and I don't want to gloss over anything. Do you have any optimization strategies that you use? Specifically, I'm thinking about, we have several people that have done house hacking, a lot of people that have done college hacking. Any cool stories or secrets that you could share with our audience today?
Sure. So there's a pretty good story on how I got a scholarship, and it actually involves how I met Becky in the first place. So it ties all this together. So actually, both of us got a scholarship. It's called the Evans Scholars Caddy Scholarship, and you get it for being a golf caddy for several years and then getting good grades in high school. So we both got full rides to college for being golf caddies, which is pretty crazy when you tell people that. But I mean, it's an awesome program that's mostly throughout the Midwest and like the Big Ten schools, but they're actually expanding right now too.
This sounds like the biggest life hack ever. So you were a caddy at a golf club, and in exchange for that, you got free college.
Correct. Yeah.
Is that like room and board as well? I mean, what are we talking here?
So it was full tuition. We did have to pay for room and board, but it was ridiculously cheap in comparison to what everybody else pays. I think it was like $2,000 a year that we each paid in housing, and we all lived in the same house. So the Purdue Evans Scholar House had about 40 to 50 people roughly every year. It was co-ed, and we were all caddies kind of living together and going through college at the same time. And it was an amazing network of people. Like, we still have lifelong friends because of it. And we actually donate back to the scholarship every year because it was so amazing for us.
Okay. I have like a zillion questions, which let me just spitfire them at you, and then you just take it and run.
Okay.
How did you find out about this? Did you play golf? Did each of you find out about this the same way? Go.
So with me, I grew up south of Chicago, and my brother was a caddy to start. And he found out through a friend of the family who knew somebody at a country club and got us into the program. And then when he started caddying, just talk amongst everybody else, he found out that there was a scholarship that you could apply for in your senior year of high school. And so he did that, and he actually got it as well. He went to Northwestern. And then when I started caddying, it was always an option. Of course, my parents were really banking on us to get it, for me to get it. And yeah, I applied, and it's a little interview process and a small little essay that you have to write. Like Noah said, it's good grades, academics, and financial need is also another important aspect of it.
So my dad actually found out about the scholarship because he works at the country club as a chef that I ended up caddying at. And he knew that there was golf caddies at the country club. And then he found out that they can get a full ride to college, which is like amazing. So he's like, we have to get Noah doing this. So that's what I did. Caddied for probably 5 years before I got the scholarship. And then even caddied in the summers while I was in college, because it is decent money on the weekends. And then my brother actually 2 years later was able to caddy and get the same scholarship as well. And to answer a question I think Jonathan threw in earlier, I do play golf, but it has nothing to do with the scholarship. Just play for fun. And then Becky is not too much of a golfer.
No, I'll go to the range with him, but I'm not really that good.
That is absolutely unbelievable. I could probably spend the whole rest of the podcast just talking about this. So, I mean, we're not talking about bad schools either here, right? You mentioned Northwestern and Purdue. So, I mean, that in and of itself is incredible. How competitive is it to get a scholarship like this? Like, do you need to live anywhere in particular? For instance, is Virginia okay? Can you just apply for this Evans scholarship at any of these universities, regardless of where you live? And if you don't mind, just bear with me and talk me through that real quick.
And maybe even more specifically, let's say you have a 15-year-old child or whatever, it's coming. How do you coach them to lock this thing down?
Okay, so if you have a kid and you know about the scholarship program, the first step is to find a local country club or golf club that has a caddy program and knows about the scholarship, or at least is eager enough to learn more. Because I think this is available for pretty much any golf caddy, but you do have to be sponsored by the club that you're caddying at, so they have to be involved with the program in some way. So both of the country clubs that we caddied at have been sending scholars through this program for decades. So they had it well established. But the age that you can start caddying is usually around 13. So if your kid's around that age, maybe start looking. I know right now I think they have 14 different scholarship houses, and those are mostly throughout the Midwest. Almost any Big Ten school has a scholarship house. But they also have some scholars over in Washington and Oregon. So I don't know how widespread it is, but I know it's growing. And if this sounds appealing to you at all, you should definitely look into it.
All right. Well, I was going to try to teach my girls how to play golf someday, but I think they're definitely going to become caddies. That's a way better option. That really, I mean, we talk about second generation FI here all the time. I guarantee you someone listening to this is going to become an Evans Scholar just because they heard you guys talk about it. So that's so cool. So you graduated college, I think in the last 4 or 5 years, and then you moved to Seattle. So you talked about buying this house. Seattle is not an inexpensive city from what I know. Like, talk me through the thought process to buy a house. Did you guys do that within months of living there, within years? And you had said that it was before you found FI. So, talk me through A, the decision to buy it, and then B, like, have you ever thought about selling it post-FI and all this stuff? Talk through the housing decision in general.
Sure. So we moved to Seattle, and we didn't really know anything about the area. We had very few people that we knew in the area. So we ended up just getting an apartment close to where I worked because that was the only thing that really tied us to the area. So figured if I could at least be close to work, then we could kind of explore the city from there. So the very first place we stayed was pretty close to downtown Seattle. I was able to walk to work, so that was great for the commuting aspect. And then not long after we moved here, Becky was able to find a nursing job in the same downtown, even though it wasn't quite within walking distance. But so we stayed in that place for a year, and it was very expensive. And we knew that when we got in, and they had your first month free deal because I think it was a newer building. So it was okay at the time, but once we stayed there for a year, we're probably isn't sustainable. We didn't know about FI at this point, but we still wanted to save money for the future because that's what everybody tells you to do. So we ended up buying or looking around for houses for a couple months, and we ended up in a 3-bedroom townhouse just north of the city. And one thing I did keep in mind, because I really don't like driving in traffic, is I'd have some way to get to my job by public transit. So we're pretty close to a bus station, so I can just hop on that in the morning and go into work. So we bought the 3-bedroom townhouse because the mortgage was about $500 or $600 less than we were paying in rent each month. Plus we get the benefits of building equity and stuff like that. But at the time we didn't have a big enough down payment because Seattle's housing is quite expensive. So we ended up doing 10% down with private mortgage insurance. But even though it was probably more house than we needed, especially after discovering fire and all that stuff, it ended up being the best accidental investment we've ever made because the Seattle housing market has just gone crazy in the last few years. So within a year, we were able to refinance and get rid of PMI, even though we hadn't paid much extra just because the house had appreciated to where we owned 20% of it at that point.
You know how A, you're good at life hacks, and B, we love actionable tip. Can you just say what the process would be, or just to tell the audience how you would even go about that?
Yeah, so the process to get rid of PMI was basically just a refinance. So I know with most lenders, you can contact them, and if you have 20% equity, they'll probably make you pay for an appraisal. And then if it comes through, then they should remove it, depending on the terms. I think that's pretty common for conventional loans. But we just chose to refinance because interest rates had dropped at that point, and we were going to be paying for an appraisal anyway. So we were able to kind of kill 2 birds with one stone to where we could lower our interest rate and get rid of private mortgage insurance at the same time with just a standard 30-year fixed refinance.
This is the prototypical case study for the benefits of paying attention and knowing the rules. You looked at the numbers. You said the property in this area has been appreciating dramatically. We know it has. And we could just let things ride, take the passive approach and keep doing what we're doing because it's fine. Or we can just go ahead and look into refinancing. And because of how everything had appreciated, you get to drop PMI insurance, which dramatically decreases your expenses each month, right?
Yeah. So from the very first moment we got the mortgage, we had the PMI for only putting down 10%. And I hated paying the PMI just because it's a useless expense. It doesn't benefit me at all. It's just for the lender. It's not going to help me in any way. It's just wasted money. So from the very beginning, I wanted to get rid of it. And then over time, I was looking at different ways that was possible. And that's when I figured out that maybe our home is appreciated enough. We should look into that.
All right. So you guys have purchased this home. I mean, obviously, you're already a very optimized family. You're looking for ways to win. But it is interesting to me. I'm very curious, at what point in this process do you have this, I want to start pursuing FI as a reality for my future? And then how do things change for your family compared to what you are already doing? And then how does that affect your savings rate?
Sure. So we bought the house, and not long after that, we started really digging into our finances because we kind of checked all the big boxes that adults do, like buy the house. And then we're like, well, what are we doing with our money? What's the purpose of it? And then when we discovered FI, having financial freedom became that purpose. So then we just kind of cranked everything up from there. And the first step was definitely maxing out our 401ks. because up till that point, we were just following the general advice of just putting in enough to get the match. So we were contributing something, but nowhere near the max. So we cranked both of those up. I cranked up my contribution to the HSA that I had available, and then we both maxed out Roth IRAs and even started saving extra money in a brokerage account. Like, our lifestyle didn't actually change that much, but we had a purpose for the money that we were saving instead of it just going into a checking account and then eventually going towards a big trip or a house purchase or something else. Like, it was going into investments that had a specific purpose of getting us to FI.
And I am curious, like, what sort of savings rate were you guys hitting? Like, where did you start and what was the highest savings rate that you achieved? Was there any sort of progression there as you began to get more dialed in on your goal?
Let me check. I can pull that up. Okay, so it looks like I have a big spreadsheet with everything. It looks like our savings rate was a solid 6% in 2014.
Nice.
And then the next year it was 58%. And then it's gone up a little bit each year since.
That is so impressive. That is huge. You went from 6%, which I would say traditionally is, it's doing pretty good. You're on track, to 58%. I mean, this is what we're talking about. In many cases, there are so many people out there that can easily hit a 50% savings rate once they lock down intentionality. And when you're just grazing, you just wonder where it all went. So wow, what a pivot on your part. So, I mean, obviously, when you get to a 58% savings rate, it starts to move the needle and it gives you some options. So I think that's kind of a nice place for us to talk about this article that you guys wrote on August 1st, talking about this idea of a gap year. So I know you've been working at this point for 4 or 5 years. Becky, do you want us to tell us a little bit about this decision?
Yeah, so I've actually been working a whole year more than Noah. I graduated in 2012, a year before he did. So I worked at a hospital in the south of Chicago before we moved out here, and then came out here and we've been working for 4 years. And like I said before, I loved my job. I was very happy where I was at. And then I've actually had a couple promotions since then. And I think I went a little bit too far, too fast and burnt myself out a little bit and was very much tired and was ready to take a break. And we had kind of talked about taking a year off kind of later down the road or traveling more intermittently. And we kind of looked at our finances after I decided that I really wasn't happy where I was at. And Noah's like, let's just do it now. Let's just take the year and we'll start over after we get back. And that kind of gave me that little push to quit my job.
Wow. So just to catch everyone up, so you guys are taking an entire year off. So both of you are quitting your job. Is that right?
Yeah. So I've actually already quit. I've been unemployed for the last couple weeks. And Noah is planning on leaving in January. So he wants to get a little bit more money for us to take this trip. And we'll probably hit the road in February once everything is figured out.
So this is fascinating to me on so many levels, one of which is just the pure financial aspect. Noah, I know that you're intimately familiar with the milestones episode that we did talking about how you can you hit these certain markers on your journey. How far on the FI path are you based on those milestones?
So based on those milestones, if I remember the order right, I think we blew past FU money and we're at least at about half FI is where I would peg us right now. And the goal with this gap year is to kind of, I'll keep working for the next few months. We'll kind of just save everything in cash. And the plan is to not touch any of our investments while we're gone. So we're just going to build up a little cash buffer before we leave and then spend that down for as long as it lasts us, hopefully a full year. And then come back to the regular working world to finish out our FI journey.
So the house that you have in Seattle, so I mean, you guys have made a life there in Seattle. Like, are you going to sell that house? Are you going to rent it? Are you planning on going back to Seattle? Or is that like kind of still in flux? I mean, just depending on where the next year takes you.
Yeah, no, definitely. Our current plan is to rent it out. We feel that we can make a little bit of income while we're on the road, and the housing market keeps doing really well. So we don't really want to sell quite yet. Plus, it is a place for us to come back to if we do decide that Seattle is where we want to settle back down. So hopefully we'll find a renter, and we do plan on getting a property manager to help us out so that we don't have to really worry about it.
So I can imagine that as you're thinking about making this decision and actually announcing it, you, even though in theory you shouldn't have to justify this to anybody, this is your life. In reality, which we live in, you have to justify this to everybody. So what does this conversation look like to your family?
Oh, it's been very interesting. My mom and my parents actually are both very conservative people. And when I first brought this onto them and told them what we were doing, they were, I think, more so worried than anything, just because they know that we've been building towards this, early retirement goal, and they think that it's going to set us back and that it's not something that we're going to like. But we told his parents and they were just like, cool, where are you going? Where can we meet you? And they were a little bit different towards the answer. But yeah, it's definitely something that my parents are not really 100% on board with. They think that we're going to, do something wrong, or we're going to lose all our money, or we're going to be stranded somewhere and not know how to get home.
Yeah. And Noah, what about your employer? What did that conversation look like? Is it just a straight line in the sand? You haven't told them, they're not going to know, or is there anything there?
Well, it's definitely a secret right now, so don't tell anybody.
Yeah, we're really bad at secrets.
But no, I just plan to give my notice in January, and kind of related to the jobs. So Becky's a nurse and I'm a software developer, and at least in present day, both of those are very highly in demand. So I'm not too worried about being able to find something when we come back, even if it's not like 100% of the salary or caliber we're at now. I don't think we'll have any trouble finding some work if we decide to do that at the end.
So why wouldn't you guys just keep working and reach full FI first?
That is a great question. One that my mom has asked me multiple times. But I think, like I said prior, I just been really burnt out working as a nurse, and I work in labor and delivery. So it's a very high stress unit. And I think I just kind of overworked myself. And I decided that if I don't walk away now and take a break, I'm not going to want to do this for the rest of my life. And I do love what I do. And I love patient care. So I didn't want that to affect my future.
Becky, I have a question for you. Noah mentioned before when we were talking about the milestones, right, that you're after FU money, let's say. So we kind of affectionately call it that.
Right.
It sounds like you love certain aspects of nursing, but it also sounds like from what you said that you got a bunch of promotions and maybe you're doing certain aspects of your job that you don't particularly love. I don't know how far off I am here, but would there be any way to dial that back? And this is maybe after your gap year, so I'm not trying to dissuade you from this amazing trip by any means, but but could you dial that back and just say hey, these are the things that I love about nursing. And because we're on this path and we have all this freedom, and because we've created this life that we do have options that, okay, I want to do X, Y, and Z in nursing. Is that something you can do when you come back?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons I chose nursing as a profession, is that there are so many different avenues and different outlets that you can go down. My current plan is to definitely probably not work at a hospital coming back. I think I definitely want to move towards a clinic or do some more volunteer work in the community. And it's still up for debate and up for, what I want to do. But it's definitely, there are definitely a lot of different things that I can do when I come back.
Yeah, that's a wonderfully flexible profession just in general from what I know about it. But I want to kind of just shift to Noah real quick. So Noah, software development, do you like the company you work for? Is it one of these jobs that you're giving up and saying, oh man, I'd love to go back and work for that particular company? Is that, it sounds to me like your decision to leave might potentially be more difficult than Becky's in a vacuum. But talk me through what your decision-making process has been.
So I can say I'm very content with my job. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's just kind of, I do it. It's a reasonable number of hours. They compensate me pretty well. It's my job at this point. It's just kind of there. But part of the timing of this is that the way the compensation package was structured when I first joined this company is that a lot of things happened over the first 4 years, like different stocks vest or 401k vests and stuff like that. And once you cross the 4-year mark, there's actually not as much incentives coming up down the line, to where it almost made sense for me to transition to a different tech company around this time anyway. So we're just kind of using that as a small excuse to just take a big break in between.
So guys, at a very selfish level, Brad and I are thrilled that you made this choice because it gives us a chance to explore some of the details that I'm sure you have to consider, all the financial decisions that you have to make, as well as all the personal and separating yourself from your community. To do what you're doing requires jumping through some serious hoops. Can you talk to us for a few minutes about what those considerations are and explore that with us?
Yeah, I can tell you, we have the house, so we plan to rent that out. We have a ton of stuff. So the goal is to sell most of it, maybe put a little bit of it in storage to come back to, and then donate the rest. We also have a dog at the moment, so we have to figure out that logistic. We still need to get mail, mainly just to get new credit cards. There's not too much else important that comes in the mail. And then the money aspect of actually taking time off is very interesting, especially with the way we're going to time it. If I leave in January, then we're going to have almost no income for the entire year. So there's definitely room for some FI optimization to where we can roll over money from our traditional 401k into a Roth IRA and just do it up to the level of the standard deduction, like completely free. We could harvest a bunch of capital gains in our taxable account. And then one of the big, I would say, elephants in the room that we haven't brought up yet is the health insurance one, which will definitely affect our decision of how much we roll over and how much gains we harvest, because I think we'll probably end up going with a health insurance package on the Washington exchange. We plan on leaving our address in Washington, and depending on how much of that cost us depends on how much quote unquote income we get that year. And any fancy fire account tricks we do could potentially count as a lot of income. So we'll definitely have to balance that.
So let me slow down and pause on that, just because that's really valuable, because it's kind of like those two are working against each other. So on the one side of that, you're looking at maybe I could get some sort of Roth conversion going where you draw up to the limit of free money for you guys, which for two people would be about $24,000, close to $25,000. You could roll that over completely tax-free. And then with the difference between that limit and then the end of the 15% marginal tax bracket, you could harvest capital gains. And so you could realize all of those gains without paying any federal tax on that money. That's the one side, right?
Correct. Yeah, I think we can get upwards of like $80,000 to $90,000 in quote unquote income from doing different conversions and gains harvesting and stuff like that. But we might not want to. I haven't figured that out exactly yet.
That's the really interesting piece. So that's beautiful, right? That's $80,000 of income that you'll be able to realize without paying any tax on that. But then the other half of that is that could hurt you when doing the Washington Health Exchange. Is that what I understood? Because that's going to be an income-based subsidy. And if you realize all those gains, that could actually maybe mess that up.
Yeah, that's currently my understanding of it. And this is something that's still an open question in our minds of exactly how we're going to cover health insurance and then how that will affect what kind of conversions and stuff we can do in the same year.
That's fascinating. Those are the sorts of conversations that you get very excited about in the FI community. And so I would imagine that if you decide to do one of the other, that would have you looking at potentially some sort of health share option instead, if you ended up deciding that you were going to try to focus on this income strategy.
Yeah, we definitely looked at like the health share ministries as well, and that's another option that we're considering. So it's still up in the air at this point.
All right, guys, I want to just take a quick kind of step back for a second, just say like, what is this trip, right? Like, so for the audience out there, where are you going? Are you going to Thailand? Are you going to Europe? Are you traveling across the US? Like, what does this trip look like? Is it slow travel? Are you going to just a few places over the year? Is it going to just be a year? Like, I mean, have you figured that out precisely? Are you staying with family and friends? I mean, I have all these questions that I could pepper you with, but I'm sure you get the picture. So I'd love to hear about the trip in general.
So our first plan is to drive down the coast. So obviously we're in Seattle. We want to drive down the 101. We'll probably stop in Portland, visit with some friends. And then we don't really have specific spots picked out yet along the coast, but the eventual goal is to get to San Francisco. That's where my sister lives. And we would probably drop the dog off with her because she has been so kind as to take him for the year. And just it'll be a little bit easier getting around the country without a little corgi running around the back seat. And then after that, we have a wedding in Austin, Texas in March that we want to get to. So we want to visit a couple national parks along the way. We want to hit the Grand Canyon. I haven't really looked at a map and kind of figured out what we would take or where we would go, but it'll definitely be slow travel. We want to kind of take our time and not be forced to stay in a place for a couple days and then get up and leave. If we like a place, we'll stay a little longer. If we don't like somewhere, we'll get up and move. We plan on doing most of our sleeping arrangements in a tent, either a tent or hotels. We want to do some car camping more towards like the national parks. And we still have a lot of hotel points banked up that we can use, and we'll probably stay with family if we're in the town that they're in at the time. We have family kind of all over the country, so we're pretty lucky to have places to go and things to see. But honestly, a lot of it is up in the air right now. We're kind of making a list of things that we really want to see just in the US, because there's a lot of places we have not been to. We do want to take a trip overseas to Ireland and Scotland sometime next year. Haven't quite figured that out yet. We do have some friends there, so we want to go visit them. So it kind of depends on their schedule as well, since we're pretty flexible. Yeah, other than that, we don't really have anything else planned. We're going to kind of just take it easy and do what we want to do and kind of just spontaneously go around the world.
Nice.
Yeah.
That is so cool. That sounds like an incredible trip. And I can just picture Noah's mind spinning with, do you have a list of like every category 1 Hyatt and Starwood hotel in the country committed to memory now?
There's no list yet, but I'll definitely be paying attention to those and paying attention to the IHG points breaks, because they always have those really cheap hotels like quarterly just kind of spread throughout the country. So maybe a few of those will overlap with where we are at the time.
Nice. Yeah, the 5,000 point a night point break. That's what those are, right?
Yeah, so IHG, which transfer from Chase, which we have a bunch of, 5,000 points per night. And they change the list every quarter, and you have to book it right after they release it because they sell out pretty quickly. But we'll actually have a reason to pay attention to it this time.
Nice. That's great. So yeah, with a whole bunch of Chase points, you can obviously transfer to Hyatt as well. I know, just for the audience out there, I get a ton of value out of category 1 and 2 Hyatt House and Hyatt Place hotels, because they actually offer free breakfasts, and they're usually like pretty nice, fairly new hotels in my experience. So yeah, I'm sure, Noah, you are well ahead of me on that. But yeah, I definitely like those category 1 and 2 Hyatts.
Yeah, it's definitely a work in progress, but we'll be definitely maximizing hotel promotions and hotel points and hotel credit cards and everything else, because we'll be spending a lot of time in hotels along with the campaign.
Yeah, you'll have to send in a voicemail or two, certainly across the year, with any of your hacks. I know the audience has really appreciated your voicemails so far. So yeah, that sounds like a good hack for the future.
Yeah, sounds like a deal.
Tell us about, maybe let's talk just for a second about how are you actually getting your mail? Like, what did your research tell you? So you're going to be out and about. Based on what it sounds like you've described in this article, you're going to be all over the country for a year. How are you planning on getting your mail? What does that actually look like?
Yes, I've done a little bit of research on that, and it's definitely not a completely uncommon problem, because there's a lot of people that live out of RVs or just are full-time travelers. So there are these companies to where you can get a physical mailing address that's not a PO box, so you can still receive packages and everything else. And then for a fee, they can, whenever you tell them to, they will ship it out to whatever address you give them. So if we happen to be in Colorado or something, then we could just say, take all of our mail from the last 2 weeks and ship it to the hotel we're at, and then we can get all of our mail that way. So we basically have to pay some sort of monthly fee to have a physical address to where they'll receive all of our mail and packages, and then we'll be able to pay an additional small fee to ship that to us if necessary. Based on my research so far, that about sums it up.
So guys, what was your inspiration for this? I mean, is this totally your own dream child, or did you see other people doing this that were in our space, or maybe not in our space, but really had presented the concept of something that's doable? What inspired this?
So we've actually attended the Pacific Northwest Camp Mustache the last 2 years, and just going to that event and hearing other people's stories. And there were a couple couples there that have taken a year. Actually, one couple in particular, they kind of just decided to cut the cord on work and go travel around in an RV. And I don't think they've worked ever since. They didn't think that it would be, they thought it would just be a year-long thing. And then it kind of turned into, this is their life now. And yeah, just kind of hearing how they did it and how much fun they're having and how much they're enjoying life. It just kind of sounded like the right thing to do.
Have you guys had conversations about what if that happens to you? Like, is that conceivable for the future?
Yeah, I think so. So before we settle down and have kids, we don't really know where we want to settle down, where our future forever home will be. And we figured this was a good opportunity to kind of see the country and go to cities that we are interested in and see if we like them. And I don't know, we do plan on traveling while we have kids, because we do know a lot of people that have done that and have seen how actually easy it is to travel with children, because a lot of people feel that it's an inconvenience or really, really difficult. But looking at our friends and seeing them live, we realize it's really not much different than the way you live your life.
Let me ask you a question about this. Do you think that this choice is going to make your life more expensive or less expensive?
That's a very good question. We don't know. Yeah, it's definitely an experiment. I think we're really good at tracking our finances and figuring out what we spend. And
yeah, I can add a little bit to that. So I was looking at the numbers, and just living in Seattle, between our mortgage and the utilities, and basically anything that's like associated with us being fixed in the city, costs us like about $30,000 per year. So if we can figure out how to travel and live for less than that, then I think the overall year will actually end up costing us less.
So it strikes me that this is a very brave decision, and I don't mean that in like a condescending way, but more in just there's so much that goes into this, and I don't want to, it's a big deal is what I'm getting at. obviously you guys are excited about this idea, but what scares you about this? If anything does anything scare you about this?
We're both pointing at each other because we don't have a good answer. There's nothing specific that scares us. And I think part of the reason is because we've saved all this money on this FI journey is that like we feel comfortable. Like no matter what happens, we can always come back and still be fine. Like we'll never be rushing to find a job. We'll never be scrambling to pay bills or anything like that. Like we have this level of comfort to where if something goes wrong, we have like a decade to figure it out. So
I know Brad wants to hop in, but I'm going to steal it. That is so powerful. You guys are operating from a place of strength. And I suspected that might be where this ends up, because at this point, yeah, you're not at 5, but as you increase your savings rate for these extended periods of time, the power has continually shifted to your side of the court. And you've got this massive window. A lot of people spend life only 1 or 2 months away from the edge of total financial disaster. You're 10 years away from having to make any sort of financial decision in terms of whether or not you work or you don't work.
Yeah, and I think that this couple that I was referring to from Camp Mustache, they had some really great advice. And they're like, the worst case scenario of doing this is your current lifestyle. The worst case scenario is we go back to work. We get jobs, we settle down in a place, and that's fine. So if we're currently living our worst case scenario, it's not that bad.
That's amazing. I'm literally sitting here with the biggest smile on my face. This is the perfect FI story, right? This is what this entire journey is all about. It's about getting the power back on your side of the court. And you guys are in your mid-20s, right? I mean, that is a remarkable, remarkable thing. It took you 5 years to get to this place of power where you're not worried. I mean, you're taking a year off. You're making really what many people would regard as this drastic decision to quit your fantastic jobs and travel across the country and sleep in a tent, right? Like that, to a normal person, that sounds insane. But to people in the FI community, we're standing up and cheering because that is an incredible, incredible story. And it was because you saved money, because you guys jumped into this FI concept and this FI community. You didn't have to wait until you're 70 years old to have a retirement, right? You're having a mini retirement now in your 20s. And you're not worried about anything, and life could take you any which way. It's not inconceivable that this 12-month trip turns into a 10-year trip. That's not impossible by any means. You never know where you pick up per diem nursing jobs, or Noah picks up some side hustle, software developing. And I mean, that you just literally don't know where your life can go. And that is just so exciting to me. I'm incredibly excited for you both. This is a remarkable story.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely a crazy adventure. And
it strikes me that both of you are very creative, empowered individuals. And I'm curious, does a side hustle fit into this in any way, shape, or form? Noah, I know that you have the blog in the background, and I'm sure that there is some level of income that comes from the blog. But on top of that, do you have any interest, either of you, in any sort of alternate side hustle?
I at least at the blog at the moment is bringing in dollars per day. So you can extrapolate that out over a year, then you know about how much it's making at the moment. But I don't think we have any specific side hustles in mind, but just kind of what you said, like we can pick up nursing jobs, or I could pick up some like remote software work. Like there's definitely remote jobs available in that field. I don't know. Becky, do you have any side hustles?
Well, no, not particularly. Part of me taking time off is to figure out if there is something else I want to do, and Noah as well. If we find something along the way that we really like doing that we could make money off of, it can turn into a side hustle. We currently don't have any ideas.
Well, it strikes me that two people that were able to go to college for free by being full-time caddies will likely come up with some sort of unorthodox or unconventional choice to bring in some sort of income. I mean, that's a thing that I think we find over and over in the FI community, is that most people, when they've reclaimed their time and then they start investing that time into just being creative and seeing where that goes, most people can figure out a way to start bringing in an extra $5 to $10,000 a year when they're not tied to the hamster wheel. And when you combine that with 10 years of savings, it can go a long way.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of different options.
So, no, I know that you've been passionate about travel hacking for a long time, and I know that the blog has been an outlet for you to write down a lot of those ideas. Now you finally have time to execute on these. I think to some degree, it's a source of irritation for Brad that he has all these ideas, but he never gets to use them. But, I'm wondering, you've actually now set aside a year to just do this stuff. What do you actually want to do with regards to travel hacking?
Well, it'll be an experiment because without actually having any income, I'm not sure if they'll keep approving us for cards or not. So that'll be one thing. And then the other item is that up till this point, because we've been working full time, we've been accumulating a lot more points than we've been spending. So we'll actually have a reason to like dwindle those balances down a little bit and actually get the value that we earned a while ago.
So I don't know which one of you, whether this is a Becky or a Noah question, but I am curious in terms of travel rewards that you've already executed your game plan on, what was your biggest travel rewards win?
So that's an easy one. It's definitely our honeymoon. So we got married just over a year ago. And right after that, we went on this giant honeymoon. So I started with travel rewards and credit cards about 3.5 years ago, about the same time I discovered FI and everything else. And after the first few cards, I wanted to have a purpose. Like, what are we saving all these points for? Is there a trip I can optimize? Because that's what I love to do. Once we start earning points and stuff, I'm like, how can we maximize the value? What can we do with these? So the honeymoon was obviously on our radar at that point. I think we'd already booked a venue for the wedding. And we knew we wanted to go on a big honeymoon. So we started pretty abstract we just kind of want an exotic location somewhere. And after looking at a few different options, we settled on Fiji and then saved up a bunch of Alaska miles, a bunch of American Airlines miles, and was able to do business class from Seattle to New Zealand. We spent 4 days in New Zealand. And then we did the return trip was booked with Alaska miles. So we took a 12-day quote unquote stopover in Fiji. So it was all one ticket. So we went from New Zealand to Fiji, spent 12 days in Fiji, and then went from Fiji back to Seattle, also in business class. And all of our hotels for those 16 nights, I think, were also covered by points. So the entire trip was less than $500 out of pocket, which was just amazing.
What would it have cost? Did you ever price it out to see what it would have cost if you just paid standard fare?
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of throwing out like huge valuations that you get from business class and everything. But if you did book the exact same trip that we took with cash, it would have been about $14,000.
That is awesome. Well done, sir. Well done. And Brad, you got the business redemption there too. I know that's something that you have not done yet.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. So Noah, business class on a trip of that length, worth the extra miles? I know there's a lot of conversation in the travel rewards world and also in the FI world as it relates to travel rewards over like, do you just book economy and try to get more free flights, or was it worth it for business class, or next time would you do first class? Talk me through what that redemption looked like.
Yeah, so it's definitely a consideration that we look at a lot, and we're definitely fine flying economy. We took a trip to Europe earlier this year. We did business class one way and economy back just because that's how the availability worked out, and it was perfectly fine. But I know for this big honeymoon trip, we definitely wanted to do something kind of crazy, so we definitely had business class as a goal. But my advice for most people would be it's all about how much you're earning and how many trips you want to take. So, I mean, if you're aggressive with opening up credit cards, then you can take business flights when you go internationally and still have plenty of miles to cover that. But if you're less aggressive with credit cards or you go on a lot more trips, then it probably makes sense to stick in economy and like max out the value of the limited number of points that you do get. So it's all about looking at both sides of the equation. So if your earning is very high, then go for business. Why not? But if your earning is on the lower end, then make those miles last as long as you can.
Is it going to cause you pain to go a year without opening new cards?
Well, I'm going to try to open cards. I don't know how that will go.
Well, we're rooting for you. All right, guys. Well, before we let you go today, we want to take a couple minutes and introduce you to the hot seat. Becky, are you ready for this?
I am ready.
In a world drowning in debt and rampant consumption, trapped by the chains of lifestyle inflation, these questions highlight the secrets of those who have broken free. Welcome to the Choose FI Hot Seat.
Every time. It's so good.
It's hilarious and good, all wrapped in one. All right, guys. Question number 1. Your favorite blog that's not your own.
All right, so I'll go first. So this one is a little bit outside of the FIRE space, but very much so in the travel hacking space. And I'm going to have to go with Doctor of Credit. They always seem to be on top of like the latest credit card deals, the latest bank offerings, like discounted gift cards. Like we've saved so much money just by following that blog that it's crazy. Like they're always on top of all the latest deals.
And yeah, no, I've seen Doctor of Credit actually linked to you on at least one occasion that I recollect, and I'm sure multiple occasions. And I just remember saying, "Oh wow, good for Noah. That's a nice mention in the travel rewards world."
Yeah, you definitely get a little spike in traffic when that happens. It's always fun to watch.
All right, Becky, your favorite blog that's not your husband's.
Yes, can't quote him here. But no, for me, I'm actually not a big blog reader, which I know is probably not what everyone wants to hear. But I've actually gotten more into podcasts. And for me, the way I learn is by audio. I don't really comprehend stuff when I read it. I have to read it like 1,000 times to understand it. So I guess for me, podcasts are definitely I'm more into, and I love. I mean, you guys, I'm still catching up. I think I have 9 more episodes.
Did we just get mentioned in our own hot seat, Brad?
You did.
That's a first. That is awesome.
Oh, you just made my day.
Yeah, but I also love the Tim Ferriss show. I listen to him on a weekly basis. And if I want some fluff in my life, I'll listen to This American Life, which Ira Glass is a great storyteller, and he's a lot of fun to listen to.
Yeah, it's an NPR show, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the compliment. That really does mean the world. Right in there with Tim Ferriss. I will take that company anytime.
Yeah, that's like a life's goal for me. I think the Tim Ferriss show is my all-time favorite podcast. So yeah, just to be mentioned in the same breath, that's pretty cool.
All right. Question number 2, Noah, your favorite article of all time?
I'm going to have to go with one on Go Curry Cracker called Never Pay Taxes Again. I mean, it's just an amazing breakdown of all the different little tricks that you can use in early retirement to get money out of traditional accounts and harvest gains, to just kind of what we talked about earlier, being able to get $80,000 to $90,000 as a couple in basically tax-free income is unbelievable. And that's the article that opened my eyes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It totally is a game changer. And even people in the FI community don't always realize the power of the tax optimization tools that they have available to them. So I think just spreading the word on that is a massive deal. So absolutely couldn't agree with you more. Becky, what about you?
So that would have to be The Mad Scientist. Most recently, he wrote about the valuable lessons from his first year of freedom. And just reading that was really inspiring and really kind of got me excited about this year off that we're going to take.
Yeah, that has been mentioned several times. It was on my radar. I haven't read that yet, but I will definitely do so. And we will also link to that in the show notes as well.
All right, Noah, your favorite life hack.
All right, so I'm going to do a really short one first. So my mini life hack is that we're actually recording this podcast on a Rock Band microphone that I got back in college for the Xbox 360, but it's a USB microphone and it works just as well as any other one.
Frugal win of the week right there.
So my real favorite life hack has to be the travel hacking with the credit cards. Because balancing living a more frugal lifestyle to save for FI and being able to travel the world, credit card travel hacking is the perfect bridge to be able to make it affordable and still be able to see many parts of the world, which is just amazing.
Yeah, I agree completely. It is just the perfect kind of hobby for people with the FI mentality. I think it really does go hand in hand. As you well know, I love travel rewards myself. So, Becky, I certainly did not mean to leave you out there. I just know that Noah is the king of life hacks. So I wanted to start with him first. But what's your favorite life hack?
So for me, it would have to be, there's this app called MyFitnessPal. Within the past year, both Noah and I have gotten a lot more into fitness. And we bought Fitbits for each other for Christmas last year. And there's an app that links to that where you can track all your calories and put workouts in and figure out kind of what you're eating and where you're at. And it has been a huge eye-opener for me because, kind of like with finance, people don't really know what they're spending. And I think with food, people have no idea what they're eating and how many calories they're actually putting into their body. So I have been very much obsessed with this, and it has changed my whole way of eating and my whole way of looking at food.
That's really cool. I've always been curious how those things work and like how much actual effort do you have to go through to enter the information? Like how accurate is it? Those have always been my hangups on why I haven't pursued something like that. So I'd love to hear more about it if you don't mind.
Yeah. So for accuracy, it's kind of, I'm actually not quite sure I think it's in the ballpark of kind of where you should be, but if something has a barcode, you can scan it into the app and it'll tell you all the nutritional information that's in it. And then you can also create your own recipes and kind of go back to that every time you eat it. And it syncs to my Fitbit. So it kind of tells how many steps I've taken, how many calories it thinks I've burned, which is probably not like super accurate, but I think it's definitely helped. I mean, I've lost weight. Noah's lost weight in the past year. And I think it definitely just kind of being aware of what you're eating just kind of makes you more conscious of how to eat and kind of what to eat.
And Noah, I saw that you did like a 20-something odd mile run through shark-infested water recently. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that. No, it's the toughest Mudder. It was an 8-hour overnight event from midnight to 8 a.m. where you complete as many 5-mile laps as you can on this obstacle course full of like monkey bars and like 10-foot walls you have to climb over and barbed wire you have to crawl under through mud and jumping in and out of water a bunch of times. We crossed a river at one point, but I was able to complete 4 laps during the event, which totaled up to 20 official miles. I think my GPS watch said 22 miles, but it was a ton of fun. I've been really getting into obstacle course races, and this is by far the craziest one I've done so far. But yeah, I like it.
It's interesting, people's different definitions of fun.
Yeah.
All right. Question number 4. Becky, your biggest financial mistake.
Yeah, so this is actually one that we've both been thinking about that we can't really think of an answer, which...
It's got to be the ultimate answer.
Yeah, that's the best possible answer.
It's hard. I mean, we're still so young in life that we're bound to make a mistake in finance someday.
Have you ever had an overdraft fee?
No.
I hate both of you. That's awesome. Well played. Well played.
No, I can add a little bit. I mean, there's a bunch of really small stuff that just doesn't really. It's hard to call it like a big financial mistake. Like we obviously should have been maxing out our 401ks earlier. Like we should have been investing a little more optimally when we first started and stuff like that. But it doesn't add up to anything significant so far. So we're just trying to avoid making any in the future would be our biggest goal.
We need to find someone that has made every financial mistake and is at the age of 55 and is turning it around and is crushing it. That's the next story we got to track down, Brad. But you guys, I just want you to know, I am super excited because of the decisions that you made up to this point, how it's really just opening up the door for this next year for you guys. It's really cool to see what just making these right decisions over a relatively short period of time, the freedom that it gives you. Very, very inspiring. You know, based on all that and all the decisions that you made to this point, what advice would you give your younger self? Noah, you go first.
Kind of along the same lines, like nothing too major. Just discover financial independence a little earlier, I guess, and max out accounts. But I mean, with how far we've come in such a short time, I feel like just keep doing what you're doing would be my advice. Just keep following the path. You'll be great at 27. Hopefully it keeps going beyond that.
Anything to add to that, Becky?
I would tell my younger self to not really worry in life in general. I've always been someone to kind of always think about the worst possible option. And I think Noah's definitely taught me since I've met him to, it will all work out. Don't sweat the small stuff and just kind of like live your life to its fullest and be your own person. I think a lot of what I did was worrying about what other people thought of me, and to not worry about that would be, I think, a huge benefit for my younger self.
That is brilliant advice. And I would love to end the podcast right there, but we do have one little bonus question for you. I think we should end it there, but I will ask, what's your favorite purchase that you made on Amazon.com in the last year?
Yeah, so mine is quite funny. I haven't really bought a whole lot of things, but I don't know if you guys know, like if you take an Alaska flight or a Delta flight, they give you those little Biscoff cookies as your
I love those things.
As your snack. Yeah, well, I tried to find them at all of our local grocery stores and could not find them. So I found them on Amazon and purchased a 3-pack, like big boxes of them. So that has been my little guilty pleasure this year.
That's really cool. Are they still available on Amazon? I'll have to get the link from you.
Yeah, no, they definitely are.
Nice. We'll put that in the show notes for sure.
Okay.
And mine has to be the thing that I alluded to earlier, but it's the GPS watch. So as Becky said, we got Fitbits late last year, and that worked great for a while, but you can't like submerge it in water. So as I was doing all these obstacle course races, I wanted to be able to track my pace and time like on the course. So I got a pretty nice watch with GPS built in that's super rugged. I can beat it up and it'll still keep working. So that's been a pretty awesome purchase that I've used a lot.
Is it barbed wire proof for you crawling underneath this thing in the middle of the night as well?
So far, so good. Yeah.
Nice.
It's still working after that 8-hour event.
Sounds like so much fun. Who would do that?
I don't believe you.
All right, Noah and Becky, we'll see you at Florida at Camp Phi, right?
Yeah, I think you guys are going to be at FinCon, right?
Absolutely. So we'll
see you at FinCon and we'll see you in Florida.
Nice.
Will
both of you be at both events?
Yeah, I'll be there too.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, Noah and Becky, before we let you go, I'm sure people are going to want to connect to your journey, connect with your story, find out more about what you guys are doing, both over at moneymetagame.com and also specifically on this gap year, this trip that you're taking. How can people connect with you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is definitely the blog at Money Metagame. I have a contact page there, so you can comment on articles or just send me a direct email if you want something that you don't want to reveal to the world. But I'm also pretty active on Twitter, so it's just at Money Metagame, all one word. And yeah, we plan to keep the blog updated with what we're doing on the trip. trip, how much we're spending, and everything else that comes to mind. Hopefully we can find some time to write while we're out having fun.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for coming on the show. You guys have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you soon.
You too. Thanks, Jonathan.
Well, this was a really exciting and novel episode focusing on the concept of the gap year. I'm very excited to get a chance to explore this idea with you guys even further in our Friday roundup, which we'll release in just a few days here. Thanks for joining us today as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.
Thank you for being a part of the Choose FI community. If you want to support us, here are 4 easy ways. 1, leave us an iTunes review. If you want to do that, just go to choosefi.com/iTunes. 2, use our page to sign up for travel credit cards. If you want to travel the world with miles and points instead of your hard-earned dollars, then just go to choosefi.com/cards and get started today. 3, if you're working on the milestones of FI, set up a personal capital account to track your progress and use our affiliate link. It's completely free, and just go to choosefi.com/PC. P as in Paul, C as in cat. And 4, and most importantly, find your friends, coworkers, and family members who might be open to this message and tell them about the podcast. Have them start with episode 38, The Why of FI, and right behind that, have them go listen to episode 21, The Pillars of FI. It is a fantastic starting place. The fire is spreading. We'll see you next time.